It's Captain Dylan Hubbard here at Hubbard's Marina, and welcome to the Sunday Night Live Stream Show. I missed you guys, and I'm glad to be back. Hopefully, you're excited for another great show tonight. We're going to be talking fishing, answering questions, giving away free fishing trips. That's right, $1,500 in free trips during our live stream show every Sunday night. Tune in and join us. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. We're going to be talking about what's going on now, what's coming up, answering your questions live, going over the weather, going over some announcements, and more. So hopefully you're ready for a great time. Again, we do this every Sunday night at 7:30 p.m., so hopefully you'll join us every week right here on the Hubbard's Marina Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all those different pages, and hopefully you enjoy the show, and I hope and pray you'll tell your friends about the show too, so we'll have even more folks join in next week and having a good time with us on our Sunday night show. As always, we like to kick things off by giving a shout out to our friends over there at Gator Jim's Tackle. Gator Jim's Tackle, 3301 Pinellas Point Drive South in St. Pete. If you haven't stopped by to see our friends at Gator Jim's Tackle, you are missing out. Crazy deals, killer selection, great people over there. Stop by, tell them Hubbard's Marina sent you. It is a really, really cool tackle shop. Local people, good staff for sure. So check them out, 3301 Pinellas Point Drive South in St. Pete. Also want to start by giving a shout out to our friends over in our supporters group. If you haven't checked out or thought about our supporters group, you're missing out. It's only $4.99 a month. You're going to get private access to our private group. It's a really tight-knit community. You learn more, and you get to interact with other people who fish with us often. Plus, you get access to our weekly supporters after show, and you get a lot of behind-the-scenes info, some behind-the-scenes communication, and a little bit more up-to-the-minute info. So well worth the $4.99 a month. Less than $5 gets you in the supporters club. So check it out. Definitely pretty cool option there on Facebook. Also want to make sure we give a shout out to those who are sending stars. Stars are a way for those watching on Facebook to send support and help fuel the show, much like on TikTok you can send those gifts. Nick Nieves with a big 1,200 stars. James McCullum with a big 500 stars. We had Mick Higgins with a big 500. Larry White with a big 1,000. And we also had Angie Darling with a big 500 as well. Seth Rutherford, John Bull, Laura Cambron, Yukimi Barker. We had Robert Riggs, Jason Richmond, and Brian Eakins, D. Beers, Ben Young, Jason Richmond again, Kathy Kless, and D. Beers with a big 1,200 stars. Thank you guys all for the support and helping us out for our show. Hopefully everybody's excited to have the show back. We missed you last week. We took a week off for Christmas and the holidays, but definitely excited to be back this week and talk fishing with you guys yet again. So we talked a little bit about Gator Gyms and our star senders and supporters. Now it's time to get into the photos. But before we get into the photos, want to make sure we give you guys a reminder. We're going to be giving away $1,500 in free trips during the show. How you enter to win those free trips is you watch the show live. You got to watch the whole show actually live. You got to be present. Also, you want to make sure you've commented one time on the Hubbard's Marina Facebook stream. That's how you're entered for a chance to win. One comment on the Hubbard's Marina live stream on Facebook. You can watch on YouTube, you can watch on TikTok, you can watch on Instagram, you can watch on Trovo or Twitch, but you have to comment once on the Hubbard's Marina live stream on Facebook in order to be eligible to win. Then you have to stay tuned and watch live, because if your name is picked as one of the lucky winners, you've got 5 minutes or less to text us your full home address to the phone number on the screen. Also, if you want your question answered live during the show, you have to text us that question to the phone number on the screen. Your comments are great, but they go by really quickly because we're streaming to so many different platforms and so many different pages. So we'll miss your comments unless you text your question in. So if you have a question you want answered live during the show, you do have to text it in to the phone number at the bottom of the screen. Don Schuett, appreciate those 200 stars. Ben Young and Jason Richmond, appreciate those stars as well. Thanks, guys. All right, so let's get into the photos and show you guys what we're catching. We always like to start inshore, and then we work our way a little bit near shore and offshore. So starting inshore, what we've been catching this past week, we're definitely seeing some nice black drum. The black drum have been moving around. We're seeing some nice trout action too. We're seeing some good action on trout. Where did I go? There's the trout. Trout are definitely very excited right now. Cooler water temperatures really make the trout active. We've been seeing some larger average sizes. They get really active throughout the entire area, from the beaches to the bridges to the docks to the flats to the mangrove shorelines, oyster bars, even dock lines. Trout are virtually everywhere right now. And you really want to look for areas that constrict water flow, points, pockets, passes, little potholes, areas those trout can congregate and ambush passing bait. The redfish have been super prolific as well. Redfish, trout, and sheep's head are three very cold tolerant species, so even when it's cold out and really nasty, those species seem to still be pretty active. Whereas the snook definitely get into a little bit of cold shock. They're a little bit harder to get biting, and they really recede into the upper bay and back bay waters when it gets cold, chilly, and they're less likely to feed. But these redfish have been super active. Seeing these kind of schoolie size slot and underslot redfish a lot of places right now, so real good time. The snook ninja himself, John Sasser, he's still pulling a few snook, but he's not fishing his typical area in John's Pass. He's definitely hunting for them a little further back into the upper bay and back bay waters. But you can catch snook. You just got to find those wind-protected, sun-drenched shorelines, dark bay mud areas, fish the salooner major or minors. You'll definitely have a better shot for those snook. Some big trout right now for sure. Free line and live shrimp around the dock lights and bridge lights at night. Fishing the flats or mangroves or dock lines during the day has been a good option for the trout too. As you can see, trout have been super prolific. And that's about it inshore. Then we'll work our way near shore and offshore. Don Schuett, appreciate those 800 stars again. Jason Richmond, appreciate those stars. Stephen Batchelor as well. And then Christina Hall with a big 3,000 stars. Thank you, Christina. All right, so let's work our way near shore and show you guys what we're catching a little deeper. Definitely lots of family fun on our 5-hour half day. Here's Captain Seabass's daughter with a nice gray snapper, having fun at work with her dad. We're seeing the hogfish bite going pretty well for us. Hogfish have been pretty prolific near shore. We're seeing some blackfin tuna offshore, trolling, flatlining. The mutton snapper have been crazy as of late, seeing a lot of mutton snapper, so pretty cool to see those. The African pompano have been pretty darn prolific too. We're seeing quite a few of these African pompano. This last trip that came in this morning, the 39-hour trip, they had something like 30 pompano caught. Unfortunately, we're only allowed 2 per boat, so most of those had to go back, but pretty fun to see those African pompano coming up. Big porgies, fat red grouper. Red grouper season has reopened. We're able to keep these red grouper again. We're very pumped about that. Definitely looking forward to getting our revenge on the red grouper. Red snapper has closed, but they're going to be opening back up June 1st. We're looking forward to the start of our red snapper season this summer. Scamp grouper definitely are around, and we're seeing a few of them, a handful of them, not a ton, but we're seeing them on that long range adventure. The 12-hour extreme, 39 hours, definitely going to be your best bet to get a scamp. Wahoo also have been out there, pelagic wahos while trolling, seeing some nice wahoo occasionally, but mostly blackfin tuna, the occasional kingfish, and then as you saw there, a nice 50-pound wahoo on the troll. Definitely super awesome. Keith Minnie on YouTube, appreciate that support as well. Keith Minnie on YouTube. We got some YouTube support tonight too. That's awesome, man. Troy Davis, appreciate those stars on Facebook, my friend. All right, so let's see. We talked about the photos and showed you what we've been catching. Let's get into the weather. Talk a little bit about the weather. And I will sum the weather up quickly. It sucks. Definitely the weather situation is not perfect right now. But to check the weather, we're going to go to hubbardsmarina.com. We're going to click fishing trips. We're going to scroll down to the weather links page. Then we're going to hit the 5 and 10 hour forecast area, look at the Egmont Key Channel entrance, and you can clearly see what's happening. We've got a pretty strong cold front here tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow night into Tuesday, and that's going to really get some gnarly conditions. Some prefrontal activity tomorrow. Wind's going to be screaming out of the south. Then as that front moves through tomorrow night, it's going to shift out of the north, and it's going to get cold, and it's going to get breezy, because remember, it doesn't get cold in Florida without some pretty hefty winds. So that wind's going to really pick up, seas are really going to pick up, and it's going to get cold for us in the 50s. So that's pretty chilly. Wednesday it's going to calm down a little bit, but still pretty stirred up cold. I would imagine fishing's going to be pretty tough Wednesday directly behind that front. Thursday looks okay, still in the 50s, so it's still going to be cold. If the water has time to calm down and clear up, potentially we might have an opportunity to catch some fish Thursday. But then Friday, the wind picks right back up with a strong high pressure settling in. And then Friday night, that prefrontal activity kicks up, wind starts screaming out of the south. And then Saturday, that big front comes through. Look at that 45-mile-an-hour gusts out of the south. That is crazy. So super strong front there Saturday night. And then what does it do? It gets really cold again into the 50s. So I would imagine we might see a little weather window there Thursday. So Thursday potentially, I would say if you're trying to pick the best weather day coming up, today was a great weather day. And then I would say Thursday might be your next opportunity to get a little weather window between these fronts. But with such a strong front Monday, Tuesday, the water might not have time to calm down and clear up enough to make Thursday a pretty good day near shore and offshore, but it's going to be your best chance weather-wise, and the fish might cooperate just because we have such a strong front coming again Friday. And those fish, they know another strong front's coming, so they might get out there and try to eat despite the conditions, despite the stirred-up condition, you know. And then behind the weekend front, it looks like it's going to calm down for us a little bit. So hopefully we'll get a little weather window behind the weekend. But they're calling potentially another front there, looks like Monday night. So that'll be something interesting to watch. If we get 3 cold fronts back to back to back, it's going to get really cold around here. So definitely some hefty weather conditions to keep an eye on as we move through the coming week. It's going to get a little nautical, going to get a little chilly. It is definitely Florida winter. Winter is here, folks, and that is what happens in Florida when we get winter. We get these cold fronts, and they come often, and all we can hope for and all we can keep our fingers crossed and say a prayer for is a little bit of time between those fronts. And hopefully you have a flexible schedule. Hopefully you're on a longer vacation. I always tell people, book your trip at the beginning of your vacation. That way, if the weather does go bad, if we do get a cold front, you can always rebook to that good weather day. And it's going to be important to watch our daily updates. And we're going to try to do our best to help keep you abreast of the weather in our daily morning live videos. And we'll try to tell you as these things are happening when the best weather windows will be. And like I said, right now this week looks like Thursday is going to be our best chance for at least some fishable conditions, so we'll see. So definitely just hoping for a little window between these fronts, because the fishing is always best right before a front or a few days behind a front once the water has had time to calm down and clear up. So Thursday, it's had time to calm down and clear up potentially from that Monday, Tuesday front, and it's right before that Friday, Saturday front. So Thursday would be the day that potentially we might be able to get out there and do some catching. And potentially the fishing might be really good because it's that weather window between the fronts. So that's what it is this time of year. Time in your trips. around the weather, and then keeping an eye on it because that can change. These fronts can slow down, these fronts can speed up, so those times can shift a little bit. But right now, it looks like Thursday might be that day, so we'll see. All right, we showed you photos. We talked a little bit about what's going on. We showed you photos. We talked about the weather. Now it's time to start transitioning into some announcements and then your questions. So remember, if you have a question you want answered live during the show, text us your question to the phone number on the screen. But before we get in to our next segment, let's do our first giveaway of the night. Let's do a 5-hour half day. 5-hour half day. One lucky winner, 2 guests, 5-hour half day. Lucky winner is Ryan Friend. Congratulations from Ohio on the big win there, buddy. 5-hour half day for 2 guests, Ryan Friend. All right, so with that, let's get right into a little update about some of these announcements. So 20 fathom closure. We've been getting a lot of questions about this, a lot of people confused on this. I want to make sure we go over it, what it is, what it means to you, how it affects our trips. Our 20 fathom closure happens in February and March. It is a shallow water grouper closure to protect shallow water grouper during their spawn. However, I won't go into the whole thing because it's very complicated and it would take a whole show to discuss, but it's stupid and it needs to go away. But unfortunately, right now, we can't get rid of it because if we got rid of it, the penny or the pencil pushers in the cubicles of National Marine Fisheries says that it would really significantly reduce our red grouper season. So we're not going to push it right now, but hopefully there's a red grouper stock assessment going on right now, and some of the early indicators from that assessment show that potentially that assessment could be pretty positive. And if that happens, we could see an increase in our catch levels for red grouper. And if that happens and our quota increases, then our access will increase, and I will go right back to the throats of taking this shallow water grouper closure away because it's stupid. But I digress. February and March is the shallow water grouper closure or 20 fathom closure. And what it means is during February and March, you cannot keep any of the shallow water grouper complex beyond 20 fathoms. 1 fathom is 6 feet, so 20 fathoms is 120 feet. There's actually a line. Josh has it pulled up, so I'll show you. There's actually a line. So some of these areas, it's not a straight line. Some of these areas are gridded off by coordinates, and it's called the fence, what a lot of people call it. And if you put those coordinates into your GPS, you can actually fish inside the fence in open area and be deeper than 120 foot. So there are some areas you can fish deeper than 120 foot and still keep red grouper, scamp grouper, and other shallow water grouper. But for the most part, what we do during February and March on our 39-hour trips, on our 12-hour extreme trips, mostly 39-hour trips. The 12-hour extreme trips, we just kind of fish inside the line, but in that deeper area inside the line. But on our 39-hour trips, what we'll do is at night when we're catching mangroves and not really seeing a lot of red grouper, we'll fish a little deeper past the line where red grouper are closed. And we can fish past the line all we want. We just can't keep red grouper out there. So all we have to do is catch our mangroves at night and be able to fish anywhere we want. And then during the day, when we start to target those red grouper, we come inside the fence, inside that line, and we can start catching those red grouper and keeping them. But then we have to stay inside the fence. Unfortunately, no one really follows that rule except for people like us that have a lot of eyeballs on us, right? And we have very expensive federal permits that we don't want to endanger. So we follow the rules where many don't because there's just not enough enforcement out on the water. So it's really, really a difficult rule to enforce. That's why it needs to go away. But again, I digress. So hopefully we'll get that rule taken away. But for now, 2025, it will be in place. We will have to obey it. It's just February and March. And it does not mean, a lot of people are confused. It does not mean that you can't keep red grouper. It just means that we play this little bit of a game. And most of the time, 90% of the time, you'll be able to keep red grouper. It's just certain parts of certain trips we might go beyond the fence if we don't have a red grouper on the boat yet, like the start of the trip, to target those mangroves or to target some other stuff out there in the deeper water. And then we'll come in, that's when we target the red grouper and catch them. So it does not slow us down. It does not impede our ability to catch fish. We just have to play a little bit of a game. So keep that in mind. February and March is a deep or shallow water grouper closure. And again, it does not mean you can't keep red grouper. So you can still book trips then. You can still go catch and keep red grouper. We just have to stay inside that fence or inside the open area. All right, next thing, red grouper tips. Red grouper are open, and we're catching those red grouper. If you want to catch a red grouper, generally big dead baits are definitely seemingly your best bet as of late. The bonita strips, the whole squid, the whole thread fin with the tail cut, even a thread fin with a tail cut and a strip of squid, the little buffet line, if you will. So a thread fin through the eyeballs and a strip of squid is a really good option too. You just got to drop that down a little slower because it tends to spin on the way to bottom if you put two baits down. But yeah, dead bait is a good option for those red grouper. They definitely are down there smelling things out. So an oily, smelly dead bait works really well for those red grouper. That's why bonita strips are a good option. And red grouper generally don't rock you up as much, so you don't need the oversized tackle for them like you would a gag. But you do want to have at least 60-pound test. If you're fishing near shore or shallow or offshore, you could go up to 80-pound if you're fishing real deep. Octopus is a great bait as well, yes. Octopus, squid, bonita strips, mackerel strips, all those different options. So big dead baits is what I would use for the red grouper. Lane snapper is open once again too. For a big lane snapper, I would be targeting them on a 10-hour trip the same way you target the hogfish. So live shrimp, 30-pound fluorocarbon, 1 2-ounce egg sinker, 3 4/0 hook, spinning reel, and that's going to get you a chance for one of those big lane snapper. Or you could even fish on a 10-hour trip a smaller chunk of cut thread fin, a double snell rig, 3 3/0 or 4/0 hooks, 30-pound fluorocarbon, do a double snell rig with those smaller hooks, that smaller leader, and a chunk of thread fin. You're going to have a real good shot at a nice lane snapper or even mangrove snapper, and it's a little bit easier to fish than those shrimp that come off the hook real easy. You're going to lose the chance for the hogfish fishing that chunk of thread fin, or at least lower your chances for a hogfish, but it's going to stay on the hook a lot better, and you're going to increase your chances for those mangrove snapper and those bigger lane snapper as well. So you have that option as well. Then gag grouper numbers. Wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about that. Not last week because we canceled, but the week before that we talked about those early MRIP numbers, the Marine Recreational Information Program numbers. You guys saw them. We already showed you. I'm not going to show you again. But essentially it said like 1.2 million pounds of gag grouper were caught in that 15-day season, which is just asinine. But those were early preliminary numbers from MRIP. And as I mentioned during that show, this year they're actually managing gag grouper using SURF's data, State Reef Fish Survey data, because gag grouper are really centrally caught in Florida, so they're actually managing the federal biomass by state of Florida numbers. And I've heard potentially those state of Florida numbers are much better. So we don't have final news yet. We won't find out for sure until this upcoming Gulf Council meeting. We'll be traveling. I'll be flying to New Orleans and towards the end of January for 4 days for that Gulf of Mexico Fishery Management Council meeting. But I've heard the news is looking positive. So potentially we could see gag grouper for the whole month of September, maybe even a little bit more. Plus, the other positive news is we had red snapper open last year, June 1st through August 27th, and we only caught 70% of the quota, and they had to extend the season. So potentially in 2025, I'm thinking it's going to start June 1st, and I'm thinking it could potentially go into September. So that means in September, You'd have Amberjack open September and October. You have Gags open for potentially the whole month of September. You have Red Snapper open June 1st all the way into September potentially. You have Triggerfish open all year except for January and February, June and July. So Triggerfish will be open then too. Red Grouper probably going to open, or they did open January 1st, and they're probably going to close end of May. So Red Grouper will be the one fish that would be closed, but potentially that first week, second week, maybe even third week of September, you're going to have Red Snapper, Gags, Amberjack, Triggerfish all open. So there's only 5 fish that have seasons. We see the closures on Red Grouper, Gag Grouper has a season, Amberjack has a season, Red Snapper has a season, and Triggerfish has a season. And it seemingly looks like the first week, 2 weeks, maybe even 3 weeks of September, you're going to have Red Snapper open, Gag Grouper open, Amberjack open, and Triggerfish. So literally almost everything you caught and keep, or everything you catch, you're going to be able to keep. It's going to be pretty bad to the bone in 2025. So that is all to tell you. If you have not done so already, book a 39 or 44 hour there at the start of September. Those trips are already filling really fast, so I would highly encourage you to do it sooner than later. Barry Long, what's up, man? Appreciate those 500 stars. Kathy Kless, appreciate those 1,235 stars. 1,285 stars. Jason Richmond, appreciate those stars, my friend. Charles Carter, appreciate those 500 stars. Troy Davis, appreciate you as well. Big star senders tonight. Definitely helps us out. We appreciate it. All right, so next thing is the jetty update. We talked about this as well in past shows, but a big reminder and huge thank you to everybody who got involved on the jetty issue. They did destroy the sidewalk. It is super frustrating, but fishermen spoke out, and the fishermen were heard, and the city of Madeira Beach's mayor and city commission forced the city manager, who made that terrible decision to demo the sidewalk without talking to anybody, without asking permission to the city commission, without alerting anybody. The city manager, Robin Gomez, just went into left field and made this terrible mistake. But the city commission and city mayor made him go out there and fix it, and the staff has cleaned it up. So now the rocks are fishable once again. So fishermen had a big win in Madeira Beach, and that jetty area is now back open to fishing. So huge win there. We talked about the season reminders. Regulars Club is open now. So if you want to go fishing more in 2025 and you want 50% off, half price trips, the Regulars Club is a really good option for you. We're going to pop over to hubbardsmarina.com. If you go on to hubbardsmarina.com, our website, and you click fishing trips up at the top, you scroll down to fishing trips information, you'll find the Regulars Club info. It's right here on our website. There's a video that talks about what the Regulars Club is and why you should join. There's also a lot of information here. It shows you the different clubs and the different discounts you get in those clubs. And then it shows you a little bit about some of the perks, some of the guidelines, and then it talks about the pricing of the trips. So our 39-hour trip is $4.99. In our top level club, it's only $3.49. So you literally save $150. A 10-hour trip is normally $139. It's less than $70 in that top level club. So you're saving 50% off, half price on our 5 and 10-hour trips. You're saving 30% off on the 12-hour night, 39 and 44-hour trips, and you're saving $50 on an extreme trip. So that Regulars Club is a really, really cool option. If you want to go fishing more in 2025, it's a loyalty program that allows you to get out there and fish more frequently for less money. So definitely some pretty cool options there. So check out the Regulars Club. You can join anytime you want, but it does end at the December 31st of 2025. So the 2025 clubs are open now. They end at the end of December of 2025. So the earlier you sign up, the more membership time you have and the more opportunities to do more discounted trips. So signing up early is always a better option than signing up later in the year. But I wanted to make sure we emphasized the Regulars Club is open and you can join anytime you so choose. So it's a pretty cool option. Let's see, Chuck Kreider, appreciate all the stars here. 450, Barry Long, appreciate those 500 stars again, buddy. Thank you. All right, so we talked about all the announcements we wanted to get into. Let's talk about some of your questions. If you have a question you want answered live during the show, remember, text it in to the phone number at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get into your questions now. First question, typically how far do you have to go offshore to catch hogfish in good numbers? That is a great question. We fish for hogfish around 10 to about 17 miles or so. We want to get out there till about 30, 40, maybe 50 foot of water. The reason why, you can catch hogfish in 140 foot. People go out there and spearfish hogfish in 180 foot. There's hogfish in deep water, and there's hogfish sometimes at the Johns Pass Bridge. We've seen them that shallow. So there's hogfish throughout the area. The reason we target them around 30, 40, 50 foot is because that is an area where we can get to them, and they are a little bit more concentrated, and they're easier to catch hook and line. And the reason why is, if you go too far offshore, you go a little too deep, it's really hard to use a shrimp in deeper water because it comes off the hook so easy. It's really hard to feel the bite. It's already really hard to feel the bite in 40 foot of water. If you go out to 120 foot of water, dropping down a shrimp is really tricky. So some people ask, oh, should I get shrimp on a 39-hour trip? No, we don't recommend it because it's really hard to use a shrimp out there on a 39-hour trip. However, if the bite slows down, like in the summertime midday, sometimes the bite really slows down and gets a little tough. We get that midday doldrums. That's when you want to maybe drop down to a lighter leader, like a 30, 40-pound leader, a smaller hook, and maybe a live shrimp. Because then the bite's slow, not a lot of people are getting any action. You could drop down a shrimp and potentially have a chance for that hogfish. And the reason why is a hogfish is not a snapper. It's not a grouper, it's a wrasse. So it's a whole different species of fish. And hogfish are in the wrasse family. They are very unaggressive. They're very leader shy. And they're going to stand back and they're not going to feed aggressively like other fish. So if there's mangrove snapper around, if there's lane snapper around, if there's vermilion snapper around, red snapper, porgies, any of these other more aggressive fish, they're going to take your bait before that hogfish ever has a chance to grab it. So you could do everything right. You could have all the right tackle, the right bait, and you could drop it down, and you're not going to catch a hogfish if you're fishing deeper in these areas where other more aggressive fish are. If you stay shallow, 30, 40, 50 foot of water, that's mainly just the gray snapper, white grunts, and the porgies. And you can stay on that spot. You can fish for a little bit of time, and you can get those fish out of the way. The gray snappers slow down, the porgies start to bite, and then all of a sudden you're going to start catching those hogfish. So that's why we stay shallower to target the hogfish. And they bite best in cooler months, October, November-ish to around March, April-ish. Around those cold fronts, that's when the hogfish get congregated on those smaller ledges, on that flat hard bottom, those shell areas, anywhere where there's sea fans, we see the hogfish. So we generally target hogfish this time of year, and we generally stay a little shallower. Now, on our 10-hour trips this time of year, 10 hours are really the best trip to use to target the hogfish. If you want a chance for a hogfish, book a 10-hour, bring a spinning reel, 4000 series spinning reel, nice 10, 12-foot piece, a 30-pound fluorocarbon or 40-pound fluorocarbon, and then a 3 or 4-aught hook and a 1 or 2 ounce egg sinker, and bring a lot of shrimp. And you're going to fish that 10-hour trip. And what we do this time of year, now that red grouper and lane snapper are both back open, a lot of times what we do is we'll fish a little deeper to start and get a chance for some of those red grouper and some of those lane snapper. And then a lot of times we'll come in a little bit shallower, and a lot of times we'll have a chance for those hogfish in that shallower water. So we'll start a little deeper, try for some of those red grouper and lanes. If the bite's not going well, if the bite slows down, we'll bail out into shallower water. Yes, we'll get a bunch of those grunts or gray snapper, but we will get a handful of those hogfish, and we'll get a chance for them as well. So pretty cool option for some of that 10-hour fishing fun. All right, where do you move your vessels during hurricanes? That's an interesting question. Hopefully we won't have to think about that in 2025, but hurricane season will kick off June 1st, and hopefully we won't have any early hurricanes. Hopefully we'll make it through our red snapper season in summer without any hurricanes. Hurricane season starts June 1st and it ends at the end of November, and it peaks around September. So we generally see a lot of storms around that September and October time frame, and they're generally stronger as well. We saw that this year. At the end of September, early October is when we got back-to-back storms with Helene and Milton. So hopefully in 2025 we won't have to experience that, but during hurricanes the boats move around depending on the weather, depending on the storm, depending on the wind direction, depending on what impacts. There's not a, this is where we move the boats answer, because every storm is different. Every storm approaches from a different angle. Every storm has a different forecast, different strength, and different impacts. Like Helene, we were not worried about wind. We were worried about water. Milton, we were not worried about water. We were worried about wind. So it really changes our strategies on where we put boats, where we hide boats, and what we do with our boats. Plus, the boats are different too, right? The Flying Hub 2, we can pull out of the water. The dolphin boats, we can hide in small canals. The big fishing boats, not so easy to hide those big party boats. So it depends on the vessel, and depends on what we're expecting. But generally, we stick them anywhere and everywhere we can. So there's not really a good answer to that question, just because every storm is different. It's rare that we keep them in the same spot for two different storms. Happy New Year. Will jigs work for the 12-hour trips? The 12-hour extreme trips, the 39-hour trips, the 44-hour trips are all trips that are good options to do some slow pitch jig fishing. Slow pitch jig fishing in general is generally done 100 foot of water or more. Now, inside 100 foot of water, there's still some jigging to be done. People use those naked ball jigs or those banana jigs or those different jig heads with live shrimp for the hogfish. So you can jig inside 100 foot if you're tipping it with shrimp for the hogfish. But if you're slow pitch jigging, if you're using those speed jigs, that is done generally 100 foot of water or more. So not on a 10-hour, definitely not on a half day. 12-hour night, you might try it, but at nighttime it's a little bit more advanced to do some jigging. But definitely 12-hour extreme, 39-hour, 44-hour, you can get away with the slow pitch jigs, and they work really well, especially as you do it more and more often. Just like inshore fishing on the flats, beginner anglers are going to catch more fish throwing a live bait or throwing a shrimp or throwing a greenback or throwing a pinfish or even throwing dead bait, right? If you start to use an artificial lure, inshore, it takes a long time before you can really become proficient, and it takes a lot more skill, a lot more practice. The same thing applies to slow pitch jig fishing. The first time you try it, it's going to be a little bit tricky, and you might not see much success with it, but the more you do it, the more you practice, the more you get into it, the different rods you have, the different jigs you have, the better practice, the more experience and the more practice you have, the better you're going to be at it. So it does work really well, but you have to have some patience, and you have to be ready to jump in with both feet. And if you get really good at it, you can even micro jig in shallower water on a 10-hour trip too. But that is like class 103, right? That's like you've been jigging for a year and you figured it out, then you can get into the micro jigging. But don't try to start off micro jigging, because it is even harder to get the hang of for sure. All right. Jason Richmond, appreciate those 200 stars. And yes, we do support the Bucks. I was at the gym and caught the tail end of the Bucks game. It was so cool to see Mike Evans reach 1,000 yards. He's the first player ever to reach 1,000 yards in his first 11 season. And now he's tied Jerry Rice, I think the only other player to have 11 seasons in a row where he reached 1,000 yards. But Mike Evans did it his first 11 years. So he might beat Jerry Rice. He's got another season in him. So be pretty cool. So yes, big Bucks fan for sure. You always support the hometown team, right? Noah Smith, appreciate those stars. Don Schuett, the big 800 stars. Chuck Kreider, appreciate those stars as well. All right, so let's see. Next question. Can you bring a rod and reel on our Shell Key ferry trip? Yes, you can. It's encouraged. There's some really good fishing. If you go on the Shell Key ferry where the boat drops you off, head west or take a left, and then walk around the corner of the island and fish that front end, that west side of Shell Key. There's less people over there. The further you walk, the better. And definitely in the summertime, there's really good snook fishing out there. This time of year, you'll probably find some redfish, especially if you get off the boat and just walk directly through the brush and the trees. Bring some shoes because you're going to need them. But if you walk directly through the island on the back side of Shell Key, there's a bunch of grass flats. You can do some wade fishing back there. Bring some water shoes, and there's some nice grass flats in there. There's a lot of redfish back there right now. So this time of year, walk off the boat and directly through the trees and wade fish in the back for redfish. In the summertime, take a left and fish that west side of the island for the snook. Definitely some good options and some great fishing at Shell Key. Egmont Key, too. I'm curious, how do you know where the fish are caught? For example, the 20 fathom line. How do the powers at know be? Or how do the powers, yeah, I know what you mean. How do they know where you caught fish? They don't. They literally have to send boats out there to sit on that line and decide where you catch fish. And the crazy part is we can pass the line and we can fish past the line. And then we can come inside the line and catch those red groupers. So they would literally have to see us out there, stop us, and we'd have to have red grouper on the boat. It's impossible to enforce. It's the stupidest rule ever, and everybody abuses it. So it's really frustrating why we even have it. It's super outdated. And we're going to get rid of it. But like I said, right now, if we pushed it, it would actually shorten our red grouper season. So I'm not going to push it right now. But hopefully we'll get more red grouper quota. Our season will lengthen, and that's when we can push it and get rid of it. Is there red tide down there? So, Josh, if you open a new tab and just type in red tide status. Yeah, that one right there. So red tide has been around since before the hurricanes. Like, actually, no, I think it kind of started around the hurricanes. Go back, Josh. Back website. Scroll down a little bit. Let me actually grab the mouse. So the hurricanes really kind of inflamed it. We started to have some water quality problems. We'd get random times where some really good concentrations of red tide showed up. There was even a couple times where we experienced fish kills. But I actually looked at this morning or yesterday morning, and for the first time since the hurricanes, it's been background levels, it's been low levels. There's been a few times where it got to high levels, and like I said, there was one time, maybe a week or so, where we had some dead fish, but it was mostly in small pockets offshore. Since then, we've seen some background levels and some red tide around, but not much at all. Yesterday when I checked, for the first time since the hurricane, check this out. Nothing but black lines, which means it is not present. Pretty awesome. There is no red tide whatsoever in Tampa Bay as of right now, which is pretty cool. So that is awesome to see and good news. Hopefully that stays the case, and hopefully we continue to have good water quality. Interesting, to say the least. There's red tide still south of us. There's still some red tide samples that are showing concentrations, I think, around Fort Myers. But it's breaking up a little bit, at least in our area. We're not seeing the red tide, which is awesome. All right, next question. What do we got? What's your go-to top water? A mirror lure top pup for gator trout. I like a mirror lure. The Moonwalker, Salt Strong's lure, is a pretty good one too, but the top dog and the top pup from mirror lure are the OGs, and that's what I started fishing with. That's what I used to fish when I used to fish a lot inshore as a kid, 13, 14 years old. 8 years old is when I got my first boat, and back then I used to do a lot of inshore fishing, and I love that topwater lure. Early morning, low light conditions is your best opportunity. So dawn, dusk, cloudy, overcast days, low light conditions are where topwaters are best. You're not going to catch as many fish on a topwater, but when you do, it's exciting because they come up and they explode on the bait. It's really fun. When does gag grouper season open for 2025? We mentioned that earlier. September 1st they open, and I think they'll be open for almost the whole month of September, maybe even a little bit into October. What's the biggest, oddest species ever caught on a Hubbard's trip? I think recently the coolest thing that I recall was a fireback or yellowfin grouper. Josh looks like he's going to pull up a photo of a yellowfin grouper. These things are pretty cool. That that one. Can we make that full screen? No, that one's a terrible photo of it. That one. Yeah, I like that one. That's more realistic. All right, so this is a yellowfin grouper, what is commonly called a fireback grouper. These are more common, I would say, in the northern Gulf around some certain oil rigs. I've heard they get some of them around the Keys more commonly as well. But we catch them occasionally off our coast, off Central West Florida. And pretty cool looking fish for sure. Yellowfin grouper. No season. They do have a minimum size limit, and I forget what it is off the top of my head. I think it's like black grouper. I want to say it's like 20 or 22 inches, but I would have to look it up again. But I would say that's an odd one that we've seen recently. We also catch eels. We see some like big eye toros, which are pretty wild looking. We see squirrelfish or razorfish, which are pretty crazy. Sometimes we've caught lobster, which is always unique. Mantis shrimp is a weird one that we see from time to time. Cubera snapper, another weird one. Did you just Google Cubera snapper and that came up?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Pictures of Hubbard's Marina show up. Taking the 5-hour trip this month for the first time, what can we expect? The 5-hour trip is fun for the whole family. It is definitely a near shore trip. You're catching smaller fish. It's our shortest trip closest to shore that we offer at Hubbard's Marina. So we're not getting anything very big, but it's a great time. Any age, any level experience. I've seen 2-year-olds and I've seen 90-year-olds and I've seen everybody in between have a great time on the 5-hour half-day trip. So any age, any level experience, it's fun for the whole family, but you're not getting anything real big. You have a chance for a hogfish. It could happen if you fish some shrimp. We had a nice big one today on the half day. We had a 29-inch hogfish the other day on one of our half days. But most of the time, we're seeing just the gray snapper and porgies. Great question here. They said, how do I get my photo featured? One thing that we're having problems with lately is people have their phones and they love to take their own photos and then they don't share them with us. In order for us to feature your photo, to share it on our social media, to put you on the news on Friday morning, to show you on the show on Sunday nights, we need you to send us those photos. You can text us your photo. The phone number at the bottom of the screen, it's our main office number. You can text us your photos to that phone number. If it's easier to email them, email us, info@hubbardsmarina.com. But definitely the easiest thing is just to text us your phone number on the phone number on the screen. You can tag us on social media too, but we prefer if you tag us on social media when you post your photo, but it's hard for us to grab those photos off social media. And to be honest, we don't see every tag that happens. We're blessed to have a lot of social media interactions, and so we don't always see all the different tags. Definitely tag us. Definitely check in while you're there. But if you want us to for sure get your photo, text it to us or email it to us. Prefer text, phone number at the bottom of the screen, or email us at info@hubbardsmarina.com. All right, let's see here. Let's do our next giveaway, our 10-hour all-day trip. Then we're going to get into a few more questions, and then we will wrap this thing up. We're approaching the end already. This show flew by. All right, so we're going to do our 10-hour all-day trip 2 guests, 1 lucky winner. Let's see who is the lucky winner of the 10-hour all day for 2. Sarah Rossi. Congratulations, Sarah. 10-hour all day for 2 guests. Lucky winner of tonight's 10-hour all day for 2. All right. Let's see what our next question is. On your 10-hour trip, it's saying you are on a smaller boat and you're not able to pick a spot. Great point, Ed. And I forgot to bring it up. We are officially entering dry dock. So dry dock is when one of our boats has to come out of the water. The Coast Guard mandates that every year they have to do an inspection. So let's say you have a boat. The Florida Fisherman runs our 39-hour trips. Every year the Coast Guard has to inspect that vessel. 1 year is topside. The next year is hull inspection. Then the next year is topside. Then the next year is hull inspection. Then the next year is topside. Then the next year is hull inspection. So every year they have to inspect. A topside inspection, the boat is in the water. The Coast Guard comes down to the dock. They crawl through the boat, fine-tooth comb. They're checking everything to make sure it's perfectly safe when we take you offshore. A hull inspection is the same thing. The Coast Guard shows up and goes through the boat with a fine-tooth comb. But a hull inspection, the boat has to be out of the water. So we actually pull the boat out of the water on these railroad tracks and block it up, and the boat sits there on blocks. And the Coast Guard comes down and checks everything on the boat, including the hull, to make sure that we are perfectly safe when we take you offshore fishing. Hull inspection, since the boat is out of the water already, is an opportunity for us to really do a lot of preventative maintenance, paint, and do a lot of work on these larger vessels. Dry dock on like the Flying Hub 2 takes a week because it's not a very big boat. We're able to strip it, paint it, do all our stuff really quickly. Dry dock on like the Florida Fisherman or the Friendly Fisherman, our 2-party boats, takes about a month, 6 weeks, because we got to paint the whole thing, we got to sand the whole thing, grind the whole thing, paint the whole thing. We got to do all of our different maintenance. We got to pull the motors, pull the transmissions, pull the generators. Got to do a lot of work in the engine rooms, and that's the time of year where we give them as much TLC as possible and as much love as possible in the shortest amount of time possible. So we have entered dry dock. The Friendly Fisherman is the lucky winner this year of hull inspection. So the Friendly Fisherman is departing Hubbard's Marina tomorrow to head up to Tarpon Springs, where we do these dry docks, and it will be up there until mid-February. And while the Friendly Fisherman is gone, we only have 1 boat at the dock, the Florida. That means the Florida is going to be focused on doing those 5-hour half days, 12-hour night snapper trips. We won't have 39-hour trips during that time period. So there's no 39-hour trips starting today until February 16th. I think February 17th is our first one behind dry dock. So the Florida will be doing 5-hour half days, 12-hour night trips, the 10-hour all day. There's no boat to run the 10-hour all day. So this time of year, we put the 10-hour all day on the Hub, our private charter boat. So the 10-hour becomes like a miniature 10-hour extreme. Like our 12-hour extreme trip, it's like a split charter style trip on the Flying Hub 2. Now the 10-hour during dry dock becomes like a 10-hour extreme on the Hub. So we take out the Hub, and the Hub is a smaller boat. It's a 44-foot Morgan. It's much like the Flying Hub 2. It's the same length, same width, except for it's an inboard diesel, so it's a little bit slower than the Flying Hub 2. But we fish the same areas. So a 10-hour on the Hub, you're going to fish the same area you would fish as a 10-hour on the Friendly, except for you're on a smaller boat with less people. You get a captain and crew waiting on you hand and foot. It's more of a private charter experience, but there's no air-conditioned cabin. There's no galley. So you got to bring all your own food and drink. And there is a head on the boat, but it's not like a men and women's head. It's not like the Friendly Fisherman. You kind of climb down into the V-berth cabin area. So it's a little different, but it's a really, really good experience and a fun trip. And a little different, but there's no assigned spots. It's not first come, first serve. You get on the boat, and we kind of filter in people And there's not one spot better than any other. So it's pretty fun. It's a good experience, but definitely a different experience from the party boat trip. Some people like it a lot more. Some people don't like it. It's different. But I recommend trying it. All right, next question. How do you find good hard bottom over ledges, oyster beds offshore? We don't find oyster beds offshore. They are shallow water stuff. But how you find good hard bottom is you get out there and you look with the bottom machine, and figuring out how to read your bottom machine, how to set it up is important. And then once you get dialed in, that's going to be your best bet to find that hard bottom. What I always tell people is like head out there to like an artificial reef, or head out there to a wreck, some public number, because you can literally Google Pinellas County artificial reefs, and there's like 27 different GPS coordinates that you can get, and it's very, very easy to find those online. And once you find the coordinates, head out there. And in that area, there's going to be hard bottom. So head out there to the artificial reef. Once you're a mile or two from it, slow down, slow the boat down, because you gotta slow down to see the bottom. Unless you have a really fancy boat and a really fancy bottom machine, you gotta slow down to see the bottom well. Slow down, start zigzagging a little bit, and look for bottom. And you'll find it. You'll mark it, fish it, see if there's fish there. Then get out there to the artificial reef, see if you can catch some fish there, and then on your way back, take a different route. Maybe veer off 30 degrees off your path home. Go slow for a little while. Try to find some new bottom. Every time you go out, do that. If you know you're going to this spot, slow down before you get there and take a little bit of a different angle and see if you can find some new bottom. When you leave that spot, take a little bit of a different angle on your way out. Go slow for a while, see if you can find some new bottom. That's my recommendation. We are blessed on party boats. Party boats already are running at the perfect speed to find new bottom, and they're bigger, heavier boats. They don't get tossed around in the sea, so we get a really good read on the bottom. So we can find those 1 foot and 2 foot ledges, things on a 30-foot center console you'd never be able to see because the boat's moving up and down too much. Even in 2-foot seas, you're moving up and down too much to see a 1 foot ledge. So we have a little bit of an advantage in that regard because we have really good equipment on boats that are already going the perfect speed to find new bottom. So we're always finding new bottom on the way out, the way back. But it just takes time out there. Practice. Practice makes progress in anything in life. On the 39-hour trip, what is the lightest spinning setup that you'd recommend, or should I bite the bullet and get a conventional setup? For a 39-hour trip, for a 12-hour extreme trip, for a 44-hour trip, anytime you're fishing beyond 100, 120 foot of water with live bait, dead bait on the bottom, you should not be using a spinning rod and reel. Unless you've got 2 people on the boat and you're just having some fun and you don't care if you get broke off. But if you want to catch a nice fish and you're bottom fishing with dead bait or live bait, you should be using a conventional reel. Why? Because of physics. Spinning rod and reels are great, and they have really high drag powered reels. And you can find a spinning reel with 50 pounds of drag, which is a ton, but you physically cannot hold it. The laws of physics are against you. The way you fish with a spinning reel is you've got the rod in one hand, you've got the reel in the other, and basically you're working that rod with one shoulder, one bicep, your brachialis and your front delt, basically. And there's no way that you're going to be able to exert enough upward pressure on that rod. And people are like, well, it's got 60 pounds of drag. That's cute. You can't lift that. I can't lift that. And you won't be able to lift that with one arm, basically 2 muscles. A conventional reel, the way you hold it is you've got the butt of the rod underneath your right arm. You've got your left hand on the front of on the rod in front of the reel. So now you're using all of your body, your whole body. It's like a spinning rod and reel is like the equivalent of trying to do a lateral raise with 10 pounds. And then all of a sudden, a conventional rod and reel is like you've got 10 pounds here and you're doing body squats. You could do that all day long. And it's night and day difference. A conventional rod and reel, just you're using your whole body to fight that fish. So a $20 conventional combo is going to fight a grouper better than a $1,800 spinning rod and reel, because no matter how nice your spinning rod and reel is, it doesn't matter. Your physical anatomy is going to hold you back from trying to fight that fish. Whereas a conventional rod and reel, you're ready. And on top of that, if you're getting your butt kicked with a conventional rod and reel, the railing is right there. And what do you have in front of your hand? Foam. That handle of that conventional rod and reel, you can put it on the rail if you need to. You're really getting your butt kicked. Put the rod on the rail, and then you can drop to your knees and use that rail as a lever. If you know anything about physics, a lever is the best thing in the world to exert force on an object. And with a conventional rod and reel, you can keep reeling. If you have a spinning rod and reel and you try to set it on the rail, the line is squished between the rail and the reel. You can't reel while you're doing that. It doesn't work. So, spinning rods and reels are nice, and they have their applications for pitch baiting, for flat line fishing, for throwing jigs, inside, near shore, fishing on a 10-hour trip. Spinning rod and reels are great for the hog fish. But deep water, where you're going to encounter a 5, 6, 10-pound fish, 20-pound fish, don't use a spinning rod and reel. Unless you're doing something unique, like knocker rigging or something like that. All right. I feel like I lose a lot of fish by jerking too hard and the circle hook comes out. Is that possible? The old saying, don't be a jerk, reel, is where this applies. You don't jerk while you're offshore fishing. If you're fishing more than 40 foot of water, if you're fishing more than 30 foot of water, you can jerk on that rod and you're not moving the hook very much. One turn of that handle is going to move 6 feet of line. So you can jerk. I'm 6'7". I can jerk on that rod as much as I want all the way to the top of my head. And I can move that rod tip probably 10 feet. But it's not going to move the hook very much. If I start turning the handle really fast, I'm going to move 40, 50 feet of line. So you crank, don't yank. And with a circle hook, you actually don't want to yank, because a circle hook is made to just slowly apply pressure and it slides into the corner of the mouth. At least that's the theory behind them. A J hook is where you want to set the hook. Circle hooks, you just apply pressure. So crank, don't yank. That'll help you a lot. Are the rental rods on the 39-hour trip good enough to make it through? How do they differ from the 10-hour rental rods? They're just very similar, except they're a little bit bigger. And we try to keep all our rental rods in highest possible condition. If you have any problems, you can talk to our crew. But yes, the rental rods work well. They work decently, right? They do a little bit of everything well. If you want a really high-end rod, what I always tell people, it depends on how much you're fishing and what your budget is. But if you plan to fish 1, 2, 3 times a year, it makes sense to invest in a rod and reel. It's going to last you a few years. You're going to be happy with it. You're going to have a nice quality combo that you can take care of. And there's budget-friendly options, $200, $300, $400 budget-friendly options. If you want a really nice rod and reel, you can go that route. It's going to last you a long time. The Daiwa high-end stuff, the Daiwa Saltigas, they have a 5-year warranty. Like white glove service, you can send it in for service. It's totally free. You just got to pay for shipping. So the high-end stuff lasts you a really long time. So if you're fishing 5, 6 times a year, I'd suggest buying your own tackle as well. But rental rods and reels work. If you're in a pinch, if you're traveling, you just want to go offshore and you don't have your tackle, rent a rod and reel. It works, definitely. Is a 12-hour snapper trip good this time of year? The 12-hour night snapper trip is a great time. We target the mangroves. We catch some vermilions, porgies. You have a chance for some of those red grouper potentially. It's a good time on the 12-hour night snapper, and it's got a really big following. And so this year we're offering the 12-hour night snapper much more frequently, pretty much almost every Friday except for new moons, where generally the nighttime bite's not that great. So we do a lot of the 12-hour night trips this year. And yes, they are good. Wintertime we see a little less mangrove snapper quantity, but we generally see a bigger average size. Warmer months, we see more quantity mangrove snapper, but average size comes down a little bit. But we have plenty of other fish, too. Next question. Are we out of questions? Oh, we're out of time. We're out of time. Time is flying tonight. All right, so I think we covered all the announcements. We answered a lot of questions tonight. Don't forget, we hope to see you again next week for another episode. Remember, every Sunday night right here on our Hubbard's Marina Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Snapchat, TikTok, Twitter pages, Trovo and Twitch as well. Hopefully we'll see you next week. Don't forget to tell your friends about the show. Tell your family. Tell people you meet on the boats about the live show. We want to try to have everybody join us. And if you're sitting there thinking, well, if I tell my friend, then he's going to win the trip and I won't. Well, if he wins the trip, who do you think he's going to bring? The person who told him about the show, right? So tell your friends. It increases your chances to win more. So invite your friends, and hopefully we'll see you out there on the water. It's going to be a little bumpy this week. Keep an eye on our social media for updates. Of course, in the supporters group, we'll keep you really up to date. The supporters after show, Josh, what time, buddy? 8:50. 8:50 on the supporters after show. So we'll see all the supporters in our supporters group at 8:50 for that supporters after show. It's only $4.99 a month to join. You get access to that private group, the private after show, and a lot more information. So check out the supporters group. It's a lot of fun. You don't want to miss out. And speaking of supporters, Angel, I'm hoping your dad is doing well. We're praying for you. One of those insider things in our supporters community. Everybody definitely say a prayer for Angel's dad. All right. With that, we are going to get into our Innovative Pools and Spa 39-hour giveaway. The giveaway is brought to you by our friends over at Innovative Pools and Spa, and they bring 35 years of experience to building pools in our Tampa Bay area. They are continuing the legacy of their father's company, which was recognized as a top pool builder in the Tampa Bay area for 35 years. Plus, they continue to raise the bar in pool construction, design, and features. They have an unparalleled passion for the industry, so call them today at 727-788-1650 or visit them online at innovativepoolsandspa.net for an estimate. See why Innovative Pools and Spa is the top choice for families in our community. Innovative Pools and Spa has brought to you our 39-hour trip giveaway. This is a 39-hour trip for one lucky winner, and hopefully we'll see you guys next week for another episode. Don't forget, if you're too busy to go fishing, you're just too darn busy. So let's see who's going fishing on a 39-hour trip for free. Lucky winner is Chris Collins. Congratulations, Chris. Josh and I are going to need some carrot cake. Congrats, my brother. Hopefully everybody has a good night, and hopefully we'll see you next week for another episode. Remember, every Sunday night right here. Hopefully we'll see you out in the water. Don't forget, we have a Don's Dock seafood market. If you're too busy to go fishing, you can always come down to Hubbard's Marina and visit our Don's Dock seafood market for fresh stone crab, shrimp, lobster, and all the fresh fish in the world. Plus, we've got dolphin tours, island trips, shelling, so much more going on at Hubbard's Marina besides just fishing. But fishing is what we talk about the most, right? So check out the Regulars Club. Don't sleep on those options. Join us in the supporters group. After show starts at 8:50. We'll see you next week for another episode. Thanks for being a part of our Hubbard's Marina family, guys. Have a good night.